Alright, what is up YouTube? HPJ here, and I'm coming at you guys today with a Harpie feather duster video. I will be discussing Harpie's feather duster and the impact of this card if this card comes to the TCG, as well as its impact in the OCG. So I'm pretty much going to be talking about it in its inverse, outverse, what it could do, and potentially what effects it can have on the game. So, let's talk about it. Harpie's Feather Duster. Normal spell card. Effect: destroy all spell and trap cards on the field. All your opponent's side of the field. Oops, sorry. Harpie's Feather Duster is one of the cards in the game that is, ironically enough, forbidden on the TCG side and limited on the OCG side. It's not the first of cards to have that effect on them, because there's cards like Tribe Infecting Virus that the TCG has forbidden, but the OCG doesn't. And it's one of the few cards that is not said to get an errata, because even on the OCG it didn't get an errata. And the thing about it is that a lot of people here in the TCG have mixed feelings about Feather Duster. Some want it unbanned because they feel it's not going to be really much of a threat to the game. There are outs to it, but it would be nice for the Harpies to have access to one of their only cards that has not been unbanned since, the game had started. Not to mention, this is the only Harpie card affected by the Forbidden Limited list. And why not have it back, since there's legitimately a card that has an effect that circumvents around that card's existence. Not to mention there's another card that has the access to search for it. So it's just strange that Duster, of all cards, is still forbidden here in the TCG. I don't know what the TCG's problem is, especially in metagames at the last several years that have not really cared much about back row, but yet, even though we have answers to back row, want to have just one definitive answer. So, Harpie's Feather Duster comes in two forms, because I had to get that tangent out the way. This is the alternate art form of it, as it shoots away a face-down card, as, of course, the effects of Harpie's Feather Duster does itself. And then the original artwork of Harpie's Feather Duster. This is the artwork that is featured in both the manga and anime when Miss Valentine uses Harpie's Feather Duster. It's honestly nice to see this card get its seclusion. We did get this card, of course, physically in the TCG and OCG. The OCG got it through Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters Dark Stories 2 as a promotional card. We got it two ways, ironically enough. One way was through Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2004 as a bundle pack, because that's how a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Games came early on in the years, where they were bundled with specific cards that were exclusive to the game, and you can easily get those cards and take advantage of those cards being around. And then the other was Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition, Stairway to the Destiny Duels, which also featured Harpie's Feather Duster. They featured them in the same print, but ironically enough, one game didn't get massively released on both ends, and that's ended up how the card itself might have got printed twice or released twice. I don't know the full story. I'm just pretty much accumulating what happens. If anybody who played the game during that time can specify that, please let me know. I do know it was hard to get because there was a tournament pack variation of Harpie's Feather Duster, Tournament Pack 8, which had this same artwork. But that was hard to get too, because, well, you had to play in the tournament, I believe, and had to top in the tournament in order to get the tournament pack cards themselves. Unless you have the actual print of this card itself, which I believe is either this artwork or this artwork for the Tournament Pack 8 Harpie's Feather Duster. But other than that, these cards have seen a lot of print, and ironically enough, the most recent print of Harpie's Feather Duster is a ghost rare of Harpie's Feather Duster. You can actually check out the picture of it on my Instagram, because I just posted the video itself prior to. Now, we are going to talk about a lot of the situational retrains of cards and the inverse effects of cards. I think one of the biggest inverse of cards is the cards that belong to the Griffins. The Griffins are an archetype, a winged beast, well, supposed to be a winged beast archetype that pretty much counteracts the Harpies. As told in the flavor text for Phantom Griffin, this monster text reads, a legendary monster that dwells secretly in the mountains, fighting with the Harpies over hunting grounds. A single wing beat is said to cause the fiercest of storms. So, in this depiction of this monster, of course, it talks about its rivalry with the Harpies, fighting with them over the hunting grounds. This is also indicated, of course, in Griffin Wing, normal trap card effect. When your opponent activates Harpie's Feather Duster, negate its effect. And if you do, destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls. The other is the inverse card of Harpie's Feather Duster, which is Griffin's Feather Duster. Destroy all spell trap cards you control. For each card destroyed by this card's effect, gain 500 life points for each one. So it's the biggest inverse because it's destroying your cards, not your opponent's, and you're getting life points. Feather Duster did not give you life points for every spell and trap card it destroyed that your opponent controlled. So it's one of the biggest inverses. Also helps depict one of the biggest rivalries, as it has a blue background with cards being destroyed, which are possibly yours. By Feather Duster has a red background, and it's destroying your opponent's spell and trap cards. It's just a crazy thing about this game because there's so much lore in it. There's so much inverse in it. It's nice to finally have it be told in a lot of cards, especially with the Phantom Griffin telling it about the Harpies, in that, it gives you more reason to Griffin's Wing and Griffin's Feather Duster's print. There are no other cards from the Griffins at this current time to be printed or released to indicate any more of the rivalries between the Griffins and the Harpies in terms of look and appeal and effect. Now, since we are talking about effect, we need to talk about the other Harpie card that has the ability to destroy spells and traps. That is Harpie's Hunting Ground. Field Cell card effect gives 200. All winged beast monster gain 200 attack and defense. If any Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters is no more special summon, the player who conducted the summon targets one spell or trap on the field and that player destroys the target. So with this pretty much would be considered a retrain of it, but not a strong enough retrain. I mean, we've seen retrains, of course, in the forms of Heavy Storm and Giant Trunade, two of the other cards in the game that I'll talk about in a moment, that have retrains of them dealing similar effects in a way, but not as strong as effect or impact as their original card. The crazy thing about Harpie's Harpie's Hunting Ground is it isn't too exactly strong bent as Harpie's Hunting Ground, because this card only destroys one card at a time, where Feather Duster destroyed multiples or got rid of multiple cards. You can't easily do this through normal and special summoning Harpie Lady and the various monsters based off of Harpie Lady, but it does come at a price. If you got to risk the summon and hope the summon doesn't get negated. You do also have to risk destroying your own spells and trap cards, but as we know, the Harpie archetype recently has a couple of spells and traps now in its game that are okay with being destroyed by Harpie cards or being destroyed while in the background. They can include Harpie's Hysteric Sign, and of course the other Harpie cards, Alluring Mirror Split and Harpie Lady Elegance. We do have a monster in the game that has a similar effect to Harpie's Feather Duster, Windrose, the Elemental Lord. So this is a level 8 winged beast monster, 2800 attack, 2200 defense, and her effect reads: when this card cannot be normal summoned or set, this card can be summoned from your hand while having exactly 5 wind monsters in your graveyard. When this card is special summoned, destroy all spells and trap cards your opponent controls. You only use this effect of Windrose, the Elemental Lord, once per turn. When this face of card leaves the field, skip the battle phase of your next turn. So for the big payoff of having 5 wind monsters in your graveyard, and having to skip your next battle phase if this card leaves the field, Windrose is one of the few monsters to have an active effect of destroying spells and trap cards. Not to mention having the effect of a forbidden spell card in the game. You know, as most people would have assumed it had been Heavy Storm or Giant Trunade, it ended up being Harpie's Feather Duster in effect. And I don't have a mind or paying to this card because, well, it's Harpie's Feather Duster, right? But the thing is, you can't really search for this card. You'd have to really rely on it being drawn into. And it does benefit from the Harpies support cards because it's a winged beast. But that's kind of where it just draws the line there. Other than that, I mean, it's a really powerful monster. It's just, it has a lot of restrictions to itself. Let's talk about the other spell and trap removal cards. I think, of course, the two big ones being Heavy Storm and Giant Trunade. These cards were around the time Harpie's Feather Duster wasn't around, and also ended up getting hit themselves when the first limited list came around. That's right, the limited list. It wasn't a forbidden list till a year later, and a lot of its impact did affect the game. It even affects the game till now. But Giant Trunade and Heavy Storm are two of the biggest massive removal cards for spells and traps. Giant Trunade effect, Giant Trunade normal spell effect, return all spells and trap cards on the field to the hand. Heavy Storm normal spell effect, destroy all spells and trap cards on the field. Since these two relegate themselves to not having to destroy one specific side, they're both hitting both sides of the field. Heavy Storm destroying them while Trunade returns them. Trunade for the longest time was one of the cards a lot of people didn't enjoy having around, and it's part of the reason why it ended up getting banned, because there was really not much to check it. As to Feather Duster and Heavy Storm having a lot of cards to check it, because they had the effect to destroy, not return. So cards like Starlight Road and the Huge Revolution is Over ended up being a card to counteract them. Unfortunately for Heavy Storm, due to the rise of the Pendulum archetype, this card had to see its banning, which ended up causing Harpie's Feather Duster to get unbanned in the OCG. Not the TCG, the OCG. Because Heavy Storm ended up getting banned when the two lists themselves for the OCG and TCG split. And Giant Trunade was still around when the two sides held a similar list. It ultimately got itself banned because ain't nobody got time for Giant Trunade. So, yeah, it was just a real weird outcry. Of course, we did have retrains of them in the forms of Storm and Hey Trunade, but they have pretty much watered down versions of the original cards just because of the fact that they didn't want to have the cards be too broken. Which is ironically funny because Hey Trunade in Duel Links is actually limited, and we have not seen Storm because I'm pretty sure they don't want to see inverse of Storm's effect happening to be like heavies and causing the game to go crazy. But yeah, I mean, in terms of checks, this game has checks for Feather Duster, just like it has checks for any of their spells and traps or monsters. The first, I think, is of course the oldest card to check a lot of spells and traps, and a lot of spell cards, and that's Imperial Order. Continuous trap card. Effect, negate all spell effects on the field. Once a turn during the standby phase, you must pay 700 life points. This is not optional. In the original card effect, it was optional. And if you don't, destroy this card. So, yeah, despite the fact that this card is very optional, or wasn't optional in terms of paying the life points, it was pretty much the biggest way to negate spell cards, and for a long period of time as it was out, did that in terms of negating spell cards. It was ultimately becoming its own demise as it ended up getting banned, and then later on through errata, which this is the current text for errata, ended up getting itself unbanned. Like I said, it's a great check for a card like Harpie's Feather Duster. It's just if people are going to run it, because of the fact a lot of people don't run spells and trap a lot of back row this time around, and that's one of the big things Harpie's Feather Duster checks. If not, a lot of the cards check it in terms of them not being able to be destroyed by card effects, or like the next cards I want to talk about, which are the Paleozoic, chain their effects to cards on the field and don't have a problem with themselves being destroyed, because Paleozoics are an archetype that are mainly trap card based, that have the ability to change, that when they're activated, they go to the graveyard in addition to their own effects. But if they're in the graveyard, you can special summon them to the field as monsters. Then they become monsters and have attack, defense, and level. The crazy thing about these is, unlike original trap monster cards, they don't stay in the back row. So take advantage of that or lose to it. Which is another check to Harpies, because there are some Paleozoics that negate spell and trap effects, and then also have the ability to summon themselves in the graveyard or chain their effects to a card, so that way they can gain their effects as well. It's a very modern thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! In that sense, and because of that, a lot of cards like Harpie's Featherstorm become the hand trap, and then you have access to being played without having to be set. Or if you were set and your opponent had a way to destroy you, there was a way to benefit from your destruction. We also look at one of Harpie's biggest conflicts, and that happens to be the Ultrageist. Ultrageist are one of the decks that have a ton of spells and traps, a ton of trap cards they can easily benefit from, but need to set them. There are some outs to Duster, as one of the biggest outs, of course, they have advantage of is Secret Village of the Spellcasters, which is honestly an annoying spell card in terms of field spells next to Mystic Mind. But I'll talk about Mystic Mind in a minute. But we have to talk about Secret Village of the Spellcasters, because this is a card that becomes its own controversy. You can only activate if you control a spellcaster, your opponent cannot activate spell cards. If you control no spellcasters, monsters, you can't activate spell cards. And this can hurt and break the player who's using it, because, like Ultrageist, because they're all spellcaster, you have an advantage. If your monster gets wrecked, then your Secret Village can backfire on you, and you can use cards like Feather Duster to destroy it. Just destroy it and get rid of it off the field. Although Duster is a one-time setup, there are multiple copies of Secret Village, which kind of hurts itself then. But if you can set up against Secret Village, you can easily deal with it. I know a lot of spellcaster decks are using Secret Village because it hurts a lot of decks in the current game that do use spell cards and take a lot of advantage of spell cards, such as, Sky Strikers being one of the big ones, a lot of fusion-based decks, and just a lot of decks in the game that use their spell cards. So it's nice to see a spell check it, but you do have to be very careful about it, because this is a card that Harpie Featherduster can hurt or be hurt by. Another, of course, is the Mystic Mind deck. So let's talk about Burn. Burn is not always loved by players in the game. It's just pretty much a cheap out. However, when Mystic Mind came around, a lot of people are still questioning, what do we do about Mystic Mind? How do we counter Mystic Mind? Some people are going back to cards like MST, Dark Bribe, and stuff like that. But I think for the most part, is that when you have a card like Feather Duster, you can easily out Mystic Mind and deal with Mystic Mind. And then you don't have to worry about heavy spell and trap cards, having to deal with Burn. The only thing I think you really have to deal with is chainable stuff, which sucks, but it is a price to pay. And you can also end up using this card to your advantage to deal with your opponent as well. But for the most part, we're here just to say it's not like we can't run cards like MST or Twin Twister, but we do have an option in Duster to just massively get rid of all the cards. Another check to Duster, of course, would be Starlight Road, which has the ability to negate a card that is destroying 2 or more cards through its effect. The other is negate and destroy a card that's trying to destroy multiple cards through its effect. But then the other card is the Huge Resolution is Over. Haven't seen this card in a while, huh? Well, this card has the effect that when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated to destroy 2 or more cards on the field, you'll negate it and then negate its activation and then banish that card. So it does leave a way there. However, if you can play around this card, of course, you can easily do it. I think Harpies have the easiest access to playing around it, but most decks do in turn, just because there isn't too many cards that this card can check, and it is a back row card. So cards like Mystical Face Typhoon can just pop a card one at a time. Twin Twister can just pop a card one at a time without having to select 2 or more cards, and then just freely discard whatever it wants. I think we also have to look at the alternative methods of it with cards like Wild Tornado, which can destroy a face of a spell or trap card on the field, and if it's destroyed, you can select a spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. There's those inverses, those outverses. I think one of the, like I said, in terms of combinations, one of the biggest combinations with any Harpie deck, or just any deck that doesn't care too much about spells, is Anti-Spell Fragrance. As we all know, this was a very old card in the game as well. This card pretty much says both players must set spell cards before activating them, and wait a turn for activating them, and cannot activate them until the next turn after setting them. And of course, with Harpie's Hunting Ground and its combination history with Anti-Spell Fragrance, a lot of people know that it may be as basic as it seems, but with decks that do benefit from, heavy spell usage, this is kind of one of the big things in terms of answer to slow them down. But floodgates tend to not be loved, but still be used as a way to out a lot of things. It's a very weird situational thing with this game. Now, looking at all the cards that I've talked about overall, I think the metagame itself would love to see a change in it if Duster came off the list, just as a way to say, okay guys, you do need to be careful about what spells and traps you set. If you're going to set spells and trap cards, make sure they're beneficial, make sure you can chain to a lot of this stuff, or just outright find a way to deal with it overall. But I think most part with this is that because of a card like Duster being the only other card option now at the point of massive removal for spells and traps, is the TCG ready for it? Could the TCG still benefit from it? I mean, these questions come up. But overall, I think, honestly, we can see a comeback from Feather Duster in the TCG. I mean, it came back in the OCG and still going strong almost 5 years. But, I mean, it's all up to what they want to do up there at TCG, Konami. And if they want to add Duster back. I love to see it back. I love to have a lot of, have access to Duster and finally have my cards resolve through all of its effects. And, just really benefit from it. Like I said, even if there are outs to it, old, new, very situational or defensive, that's just how this game goes. And I'd love to see it because it has a lot of things it can check and a lot of things that can check it. And just have literally no Harpie cards on the Forbidden Limited list would be nice. I don't really care about the limited because I think it would just need to be at 1. I don't think it needs to be at multiples just because it'd just be way too abusable. Kind of like the MST scenario, but I think MST just overall, because it's how selective it is part of the reason why it's still at 3. In that there are a lot of alternate forms to it. Where Duster kind of only just has like 1 in a sense, but do we really call it an alternative? And even if the monster effect is similar to it, monsters have their own little problems when it comes to, their effects and stuff. But it's a nice sit down to have with you guys, and I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about Harpie's Feather Duster. Do you think it deserves to come back to the game? Do you think it's something that needs to not come back to the TCG? I mean, the impact of the OCG itself pretty much proves that it can come back and still not do anything. But, let me know what the TCG thinks about it. And let me know what you guys think about it. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell when you guys want to be informed of when I do my updates and post my new content. So I will catch you guys next time. HBJ signing out. Take care.